Hi everyone, welcome back to Simi Waters Life Coaching. Today I'm going to continue with explaining the different types of emotional neglect that can happen when we were in childhood, so that you can kind of take a look at your past and see ways that the way you were raised are affecting your performance in life as an adult, or your social life, or your feelings, or maybe any mental health issues that you may be having now that you're an adult. So I know yesterday we kind of covered the first few parents, some of the more harsh parents, the narcissistic parents who are self-centered and overly harsh with their kids, and then the permissive parent as well. Those were all kind of covered briefly in part one. I'm thinking at the end of this series, which is looking like it's going to be about 4 parts of this particular area, I'll have a list of really all of the situations that happened or that could possibly happen, and the subconscious message that those situations pass on to a child, so that you can realize how your subconscious has been programmed by the way you were parented. And that way you can pinpoint where to tackle, because I know each parent is different, and your parents might have been a mix of all of the different types of parents, or they may have done different things at different times. So it can be hard to pinpoint exactly what do I need to deal with, this or that. So if I have I'll make a list and put it out there either on Facebook or on my webpage that you can download, or send it to you by email, that you can download and kind of go through and see what really affected you, or what aspects of this you need to deal with. Okay, so today I'm really going to deal with one type of parent, because this is going to be a short video. I'm going to deal with the parent who is depressed or grieving. And so in your childhood, you may have experienced maybe the loss of a parent. So maybe a family member passed away, or a child passed away in the family. And then the parent is grieving either the loss of their spouse, or they're grieving the loss of another child. And because of that, they're not aware of how they grieve, which is completely legitimate, completely human. This is not an accusation on any parent who's gone through something like that. But this is for you to say, okay, so my mother was grieving when I was 5 years old, and this is how it affected me. Or my father was grieving the loss of my mother at that time of life, and this is how it affected, because we're not all educated in how to help children during this period. I mean, sometimes it could be a divorce, so the one spouse loses the other through a divorce, but sometimes we don't realize that the child also lost a parent during that time, and there's specific things that the parent needs to do to be able to help that child through that period. So the depressed parent could be depressed either maybe because of the loss of a job, it could be the loss of a spouse, it could be going through a divorce. Sometimes the depression comes from low self-esteem issues, weight issues, just their own victimization when they were children could have caused depression in their adulthood, and in turn that gets passed on because of that. So just all the different forms in which a parent could have been grieving or could have been depressed does have an effect on the children. It has an effect on the atmosphere within the home. So sometimes when a person is depressed, they just don't have the energy to do anything with their children. And because of that, the child doesn't get attention. And then that sends the message of, well, you're not worth paying attention to, or if a child, maybe say the parent is depressed and is lying on the couch, maybe watching TV, and the child comes and says, oh, I need something. And the parent, slumps down even further because the child needs something. The child can get the message that their needs cause problems for other people, or they're not worth the attention, or that there's something wrong with them, that when they go to their parent with a need, they cause more problems for their parent. And that sends the message of, there's something wrong with me, I must be bad, there's something wrong. And that's actually the worst message that can be sent to a child, is that there's something wrong with them, because there's nothing wrong with the child. There's something wrong with this world and the things that happen in this world. Losses through, many children have lost their mothers to breast cancer, accidents happen, diseases happen, heart disease. I mean, there's just so much wrong with the world, that it's very important that the message is sent to children that it's not their fault that things happen. And that takes being an emotionally aware parent who can send that message. Now, this series is about those of us who are adults, first of all, going back to our childhood to see if we got any of those messages, because it's after we help ourselves that we can start to help our kids. So I want you to think back, were there any situations where there was grieving or depression going on, and how did that affect you? Did that send you a message of your feelings don't matter? Sometimes the child doesn't even get told that somebody passed away and what that means. What does it mean when a grandparent passes away, when a parent passes away, when someone loses a sibling? A lot of times parents don't just say, okay, put on this dress, we're going to the funeral, or, your dad isn't here anymore. Or because of a lack of education, no one may have taken the time to even tell you that your parent passed away, or the reason why your father left, or that your father left. And so all of that builds up anger. It can build up anxiety, because if the situation isn't explained to the child can feel like, hey, I could lose anybody at any time and I have no control over it. And that can create an anxiety disorder in adulthood. So sometimes when you find adults who are very controlling, they want everything to be exactly the way they want it, how they want it, that's an anxiety disorder that comes from wanting to control their world, because as children, they felt they had no control over what happened, and it wasn't explained to them that, it's not your fault. So they felt like, if I had done this, if I had done better, maybe my dad wouldn't have died. Or if I had done better, maybe my mother wouldn't have left. If I had done better, my parents wouldn't be lying on the couch depressed. Or if I hadn't distracted my father, he wouldn't have lost his job. Children absorb those situations and they always think it's their fault. Unless a parent takes the time to pay attention, which is the opposite of the emotionally neglectful parenting, pay attention to the child's feelings. Are you feeling like this is your fault? Are you feeling like you had something to do with this? You didn't have anything to do with this. There's nothing we could have done. There's nothing, that we could have done. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. Without that effort being made on the part of the parent to send that message to a child, the child is just going to absorb it and feel like it's their fault that their parents are depressed and grieving. And if time isn't taken to, over a period of time, walk the child through what happens when a person dies, why did the person die? How does that affect you? How are things going to be going forward? A lot of times when one parent passes away, the other parent becomes really distracted with trying to keep the family together, with working hard, and trying to keep body and soul together. And that also distracts the parent from being able to pay attention to what the child needs. So all these things come together to really create a situation where there could have been some emotional neglect. Not that the parent is to blame or that the parent was bad, but it's just life. With children, you can't say, well, it wasn't my fault that you were neglected. You can say, well, it wasn't the parent's fault that the father died away, but it doesn't change the effect. It doesn't change the damage that's done to the child in that situation. So this is really just to bring an awareness. When there's depression, when there's grieving, when there's divorce, when there's chaos in the family, when there's a problem in the family. Sometimes when there's another special needs family member, which I think I'm going to deal with that one in a separate video, that can also create a situation where one child's needs can really go unmet. When there's a situation that takes a lot of time and attention to deal with, it can create a scenario where the child is over there looking and watching what's going on and making interpretations about themselves about what's going on, but it has nothing to do with them. When a parent is distracted with grief or depression, it can create a situation where the child starts to act out. The child can decide to be a bad kid so that they can get some attention, because they don't get attention any other way. So they act out at school, and they act out at home because the parents aren't paying attention. The child can lock himself up in the room, do drugs, stay on his video games the whole time because, well, nobody cares. Nobody's paying attention. And it seems like, well, I'm giving them a pass. I'm being a chill parent. I'm trying not to stress them. But part of love is that attention, is that correction, is that saying, this is not good for you. I love you. I don't want you to, go down the wrong path. I don't want you to not fulfill your potential. sometimes when children like that also grow up, they don't even realize that this came from their childhood. They blame themselves because they're like, well, my parents gave me everything. We had a nice house. We had a lot of money. You know, I should have been better. But then they don't realize, it's kind of like what we're talking about in the middle, the emotional neglect is invisible. You don't see what was missing. You're looking at what was there. What was missing was that parent getting up off the couch, putting down the glass of wine, putting down the bottle of beer, and actually sitting with their kid and discussing what's going on and giving the child information about how to process their feelings in a healthy way. So this just kind of briefly covers, you know, depression and grief, which can be a huge distraction from being an emotionally attentive parent. And so looking back at your childhood, that's the first place to start. Were your parents there? You know, I know there were periods where my mom was very busy trying to keep body and soul together, working hard, keeping a roof over everybody's head. And it did create a situation where we didn't have a lot of discussions. We didn't talk about a lot of stuff. We didn't get into the details of what's going on. And then there was definitely not the kind of discussions that, you know, oh, how was school today? How are your friends? Let me get to know your friends. You know, there really wasn't a lot of that going on. Where I grew up was a very busy city. It was a tough city. You had to have a lot of hustle as an adult to move forward. And living in that scenario where people have to work extremely hard, pretty much you have to be a workaholic to move ahead, you know, it was a distraction. So I know that even though our parents were well-meaning, and even I as a parent am well-meaning, there's still emotional neglect that goes on. Nobody gets it perfect. But if it's affecting you in adulthood, you want to take the time to figure out where it's coming from. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll be back again with part 3 of different types of emotionally neglectful parenting. Have a good day.